Okay, Dina, I'm just about to broadcast us live now, so if you give yourself about 3 seconds, okay?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dina Romero, and I am the leader of Bath and North East Somerset Council. We have chosen to have a webinar today to hear from young people about their experiences of lockdown, and also to find out, some ideas about what young people think should be included in the council's renewal strategy. What I'll do now is I will introduce the panel to you, and then we will talk through some of the questions that have been set, and then we will get to some questions that have been sent in as well. So welcome everybody, and I'd like to introduce first of all Kevin Guy, who is the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People. Also on the panel is Mike Bowden, who is the Director for Children's Services. We also have Will Godfrey, who is the Chief Executive of Bath and North Somerset Council. Chris Wilford, sorry Chris, who, and I'm sorry Chris, I forgot to make a note of your position. You are?
Director of Education, Inclusion and Children's Safeguarding.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that's all the adults that are on this call at the moment. And then much more importantly, I'd like to introduce the young people themselves. So we've got Charlie Roberts. So if Charlie gives us a little wave, Ed Curtis, Will Reed and Israel. And Indra Black. Thank you. I hope now I haven't missed anybody off my introductions. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to pose a question to the young people, which is this. What have been the challenges during lockdown for young people in Bath and North East Somerset? And what have been the opportunities and highlights? So each of the young people has been given some time to actually think about these questions. And now I'm going to ask them each in turn to, to basically give us their response on those questions. So I'd like to invite Indra Black first to speak, and she is the Member of the Youth Parliament for Bath and North East Somerset. So Indra, please would you speak?
Hi, I believe one of the main challenges has been social isolation. I think that only seeing your family and friends through a screen and social media has been damaging to young people and made them feel extremely lonely. Also, I know that some family and friends do not use social media, so you can lose communication and damage your relationships. Furthermore, I think some families may not be able to afford phones and computers, which led to complete isolation from loved ones. Also, I believe many young people are afraid of losing their social skills and friendships during this time. Also, another of the challenges I believe is school pressure. I think there's been a lot of uncertainty over school and next year's exams. I feel this has been a challenge for young people to adapt to working at home and the challenges which follow that. I'm in year 10 and next year I'll be taking my GCSEs, and I feel from personal experience concerned about our uncertain future as many young people. I also think the actual fear of the virus has been a massive challenge to young people, as many are worried about losing their loved ones. Also, I think many young people are afraid of spreading the virus to other people unknowingly, and there is massive guilt which comes with that. However, despite these challenges, I think there's been many highlights. For example, spending more time with your family when you could have been too busy before with work and school. I think there's been a real highlight for some families to have this time to spend together. Moreover, I think there's been more time to have time for well-being. Although this has been damaging to our mental health, I think there's been more time to go and explore nature and go on walks. I personally have enjoyed time to go on walks and more hobbies. I feel like there's been a time for new learning as well. So you could learn knitting, learning an instrument, language, creative writing and reading, which perhaps you wouldn't have had the time before. I also think young people have had the time to learn new skills like time management, working at home, new ways, new technological skills. And so although this has been a very challenging time, I do also think that there's been opportunities and highlights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Indra. I'd like to ask those same questions of Ed Curtis, who is from the Young Carers Group. So over to you, Ed.
Yeah, hello. Mine isn't probably going to be as good as that, but yeah, for young carers, one challenge was totally intimidation, going into the lockdown and wearing face masks and all of the new unprecedented situation that has occurred. I feel like a lot of intimidation has actually come over young carers, and having people that necessarily no examples or anything. I'm just giving a general view of younger and older young carers. So for younger people that have mums who aren't able to, let's just say, do normal things in like morning routine, like as in going and having a shower or going and having a bath, can't like necessarily do normal things that normal people can do. I think that younger young carers, so from the ages of like 10 onwards until like 12, maybe a bit younger as well, going to the shop, wearing all these face masks, following new rules. And I feel like it's been a very intimidating thing for those people who have been a lot younger than, let's say, myself. And also, I do believe that young people in certainty have been in a bubble ever since they've actually taken care of their family members. Young people in general are always in a bubble, whether that's school or at home. And I think it's really important that these people are recognized. And I think that even the lockdown, having to stay at home, having to stay indoors all the time, hasn't been a great situation, because school and going out with their friends and having a social life is another outlook on young people, instead of being at home all the time and caring for that person. So for example, a mum or a dad or a brother, that sort of school life and that social life, is that their outlook on caring for those young people. And also having people that aren't very have disabilities, as in like parents and people, it's quite physically demanding on like especially young people. So for myself, I would say that I'm okay to go to the shop and like do different things for my family, but someone who's 9 years old or 10 years old isn't physically and mentally and emotionally stable to do those sorts of things every day in and out. So I think that that's a very important thing, and not being able to see friends as well is a very negative aspect of the lockdown. But yeah, that's all I've got for question one. There you go.
No, that's a pretty comprehensive answer. Thank you, Ed. I'd now like to ask Charlie Roberts from Space LGBTQ plus youth group, and also from Off the Record, if you'd like to make a contribution as well.
Hi.
Sorry.
That's
okay. So you carry on.
No worries. Yeah. So I think challenges wise, Indra and Ed went over it pretty well, but being for LGBTQ plus people specifically, being stuck in a household which can be which people can find a hostile environment sometimes with certain family members, can be really difficult. And sometimes people have found that even digital support can be hard to get because of parents looking at phones, etc. Also, the fact for LGBTQ plus people, the fact that there's been no physical prides in June and July, when they usually take place, has been really difficult, because people have found that they felt really isolated in a time where they would usually be out celebrating with their friends and things like that, or protesting or whatever, but they can't do that. Also, just general young people, some people don't have access to devices like phones and computers, so they've really struggled to complete any schoolwork they've been set, things like that. There have been some schools lending out laptops and some not, and so it's been really difficult for some people to complete where there was schoolwork set. They haven't been able to complete it, especially I guess year 10s and year 12s, who have got exams next year. That seems to have been really difficult. I'm in year 13, so for people like me and also year 11s, we haven't had any schoolwork to focus on. We haven't even been able to like go and just like look at our textbooks because we haven't got any, we haven't got any exams or anything. So I think particularly, yeah, year 13s have found that the uncertainty of not knowing how our grades are going to turn out, and also what we're doing next year, has been a really difficult thing. And yeah, things like that. Highlights wise, I've been able to join Space, the group that I'm here representing, during lockdown, because I wouldn't have been able to do it because of the time of week it was before in real life. So that's been really great, virtually doing that. And I've also done some volunteering and stuff, which has been great, that I wouldn't have been able to do in real life because I didn't have the transport. And yeah, there's been the real positive that Indra mentioned of going out in nature, going on walks, things like that we wouldn't have time to do before. And yeah, just the online communities that have kind of sprouted up even more than that were there before. And people have been able to find online communities a lot more easily lately. So yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Charlie. And I'd like to ask Will Reed, who is from Boys in Mind, he's a youth advisor, to give us some responses to those questions.
Yeah, so I can't really water down the fact that lockdown's been a tough time for young people. You know, stress and anxiety surrounding exams for year 11s and 13s, and university for us in year 13. Isolation, loneliness for people being away from friends, and yeah, it's just not seeing families had quite a negative impact for a lot of people. Nationally, organisations have been working, to provide support. Young Minds survey showed that 83% of participants said the lockdown made their mental health worse. So yeah, and also as Charlie mentioned, many in the LGBTQ plus community, have been struggling with perhaps being in a household where it's been perhaps unaccepting, or they haven't been able to be completely themselves. Despite the challenges that we've seen, it's been really inspiring to see throughout society young people getting involved in different things, such as communities coming together to support vulnerable people, schools adapting teaching methods and mental health support, sort of moving to more online things. Just before lockdown, I got involved with Boys in Mind as a youth advisor, and we're an organisation that aims to reduce stigma surrounding male mental health and ultimately prevent suicides in boys and young men. And I think Boys in Mind have done a great job of actually adapting to the challenges. We released a Getting Through This Together campaign, which is an example of sort of youth-led project of videos showcasing coping methods, from cooking to gardening to music and to yoga and all these different things. So we've released 42 films to date, involving over 50 children and young people from ages 3 to 25. And it's been viewed 30,000 times on Facebook and even more on Instagram and the website. I think it's been a really fantastic way to share coping methods between one another and just keep spirits and community together in what has been a tough time. Obviously now situation's sort of changing to coming out of lockdown. We're working on 2 longer, again, youth-led films about feelings going back to school. So first is 8 primary school children, and the second is aimed more at secondary school children. And they're talking about the things that they're looking forward to as well as the worries. So that's been a really great opportunity to see that happen. For myself, taking part in some of these Getting Through This Together films has made me feel really empowered and connected to a lot of people who've seen it perhaps, and messaged me to say that I just tried this method or something. And I know I speak for a lot of young people when I say it's a great opportunity just to get involved and learn new coping methods. And I think it's been a really amazing example of things that can be done and the results that can happen when young people have a great partnership with adults and work to a goal. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Will. And I'd like to now ask Israel for his insights as well. Thank you, Israel.
So in lockdown, there hasn't been much teacher support for schoolwork. So I've struggled quite a lot with keeping up with all of it because I have no support to do it. So if I don't know what to do, then it will stay that way. I won't really know. Also working alone because my mum's she's had to work through this. So she's either been working from home but not been able to help or anything, or she's been out working. So I've had near to no adult help or supervision, which was quite hard. And social contact, I haven't had much social contact since my sister went back to school. So it was basically me at home just working. I know some schools have set quite a bit of homework, and some subjects it seems like there's quite a lot of pressure to do all of the work, but they've set a lot, so that's quite hard to do. With some families, school is like a safe place for them, but since they've been home all this time, they haven't been able to access school, which leads to more domestic violence. More pressure on social care since there's been more domestic violence, and there's been more calls to Childline. And the government said at the start of lockdown that they were going to give internet access to families who can't access the internet, so poor families. But I know that isn't true. So many families have struggled with accessing work and things like that. And also with children that go to nursery or are quite young, there's been no support for them either. So they haven't been able to socialize and learn from their early ages, which is, I'm guessing, was quite hard. But highlights wise, I've been able to spend more time with my family, so watch movies, go out for walks with them, and I've had the time to appreciate more what we had, so like friends, just everyday life, because that hasn't really been able to happen. So it's given me more time to reflect and just think. Also Black Lives Matter, because I think it's been such a big thing because everyone's had time and the effort, like they can do something about it and act upon all this police brutality and killing of Black people. So I found that very good. And also Black Families Education Support Group, they've been able to help quite a lot, because some at one point they were the only social contact I really had outside of the house, which was really nice. Yeah, it's just something to do on a Saturday. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Israel. Well, thank you. I think that's been really interesting, a bit of an eye-opener certainly for myself, I'm sure for others, other panelists as well. So it's certainly given me something to think about. I'd now like to ask a second question, which is this. So for young people in Bath and North East Somerset, what are the most important things that need to be included in the council's post-lockdown renewal strategy? Okay, so I'm going to ask Indra if you'd like to start us off on that particular question, please.
Hello again. So I think going forward that there needs to be a strong mention of young people's mental health. I believe this is incredibly important as many young people would have suffered from bad mental health during lockdown. I think young people are scared about the future and what will happen. I also believe that they're afraid about school and friendships. I think the council needs to address young people's mental health, as it's been a very stressful time for young people, and many of them would have lost loved ones and neighbours. Also, I think there should be a focus on education, as young people have lost so much, and how to manage the reopening of schools. For example, how would children get to school safely, as buses are a very likely place to catch COVID, and I know most people who go to my school catch the bus. Also, many young people, they might be too scared to actually go on a bus because there's been a lot of fear around this time, so they might be too fearful. Furthermore, I think there should be efforts to make sure that all young people have the same access to education, as many young people have complicated home lives. It would have been challenging to complete schoolwork, as they would have definitely had other priorities. I think there needs to be policies put in place to make sure that all children have had the same opportunities to education during this time, and so that they can catch up. I also believe it's very important for the council to recognise that young people have missed out on a lot of opportunities for social interaction with their peers, for example, in youth clubs, gyms and swimming pools. I would like the council to come up with a strategy to re-engage young people with the services they run, working with young people to reassure them that their services are safe and offering reduced prices to get young people involved. I think that would really help because exercise helps with your mental health, and I think it's very important to make sure all of these areas are focused on. Thank you.
Thank you, Indra. And now I'd like to ask Ed to give us his views.
I totally agree with what Indra's saying, like the thing with schools and the transport and everything. I'm going to go on a bit of a different path, and my ideas and the young carers' views on things. It's kind of a personal thing for me because obviously I work in a gym and I work in a leisure centre, and my mum and dad own a ballet school. So we're very unfortunate with this COVID things, being the last people that are going back to work and things like that, and opening pubs and restaurants. Obviously, it's quite upsetting to see that people are still going out and still not recognizing the rules that have been given, and it's quite frustrating from a personal view. But since my mum runs a ballet school, it's an outlook for young people to stop violence, drugs, and very aggression and knife crime, gun crime, any sort of crime. So when you go to the gym, as Indra said, it's a nice release of all energy that you have. And young people at the moment are struggling with different sort of drug addictions, smoking, alcohol abuse, and things like that. And it's an outlook for people to stop doing those sorts of things and being free to do what they want to do. And I think that it would be nice if the government or the council or anyone would be able to open up different drama clubs and council-funded drama clubs, because I'm actually a part of a drama club myself, and every time that I have to go, I have to pay and things like that. And it would be nice if the council funded a drama club or a gym or a gathering where people can just be themselves and not have to pay to have a good time. Also, a lot of people have said that they would like a break sort of thing and have a rest from all of the things that people have been in politics. So the Black Lives Matter thing, the racism and all of the politics that has come into the world now, everybody would just like a sort of break from it all, because they're seeing that the level of violence and the level of gang affiliation and different crimes have gone up in numbers. And I think that the government should give the young people an outlook, like a drama club or a festival or something, because we do obviously the young carers have a YMCA, I think it is. It's a young carers festival that happens every summer, and it gives young people an opportunity just to get away from everything that happens in the world and just to be themselves around people that are like them. But yeah, that's all that the young carers think of. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. Charlie, what about from you?
Hi. So I completely agree with Ed on the fact that young people need kind of an outlet. So I think getting things like Space, the group that I'm a part of, and youth groups, and also sporting activities open in as safe a way as possible, as soon as possible, would be great, because the isolation has been so great up to this point, that it would just, as soon as it's safe, getting those kind of things, making those kinds of things a priority would be really important, I think. I also think Indra mentioned the equality of opportunity, so making sure that that's addressed, because the difference in educational experiences in lockdown will have been so great. So any way that the council can address that, I think would be really important. Also, similar to something that Indra said, public transport. A lot of young people rely on public transport. So because of the loss of independence that we've had in lockdown from the loss of public transport has been huge. And yeah, buses to school, things like that. How are the council going to address, the lack of if you can only have a few people on a bus at a time, how are people going to get to school? Are people going to be afraid to go back to school because they will have to take public transport? Things like that are definitely something that need to be addressed. Also, summer programs during this summer that would usually be in place, so like food banks that do food for young people that would usually have free school meals, and just general support and things like that, which would usually be there in the summertime, which might not have been a priority lately because of all of the other things that have been a priority, will definitely need to be addressed, and making sure that those are something that happens again this year as they have done in previous years. And also considering job prospects for young people, because obviously the jobs market is going to be very different after lockdown, and but a lot of young people still need to work, whether it's for their families or to fund them to go to uni or anything like that. So yeah, and then finally, I think just remembering all of the things that have been brought up in lockdown, maybe things that weren't to do with lockdown, such as Black Lives Matter, just remembering all of those important issues that we've had time to think about in lockdown, especially young people who have been so vocal on the internet and things like that, that need to be, we don't want to go out of lockdown and just forget about all of those wonderful things that have come up on the internet that we've started to actually address, because we're too busy sorting everything out. Just always having those in the background and making sure we're still addressing them even when we're busy, back to our normal lives. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Will, can I ask those questions from you as well, please?
Yeah, so lockdown's really allowed us just to take a bit of a pause from the normal, the speed of normal life and the mania of it all, just to see how I think we're feeling a bit deeper down, and noticing, actually allowing ourselves to notice the fact that we put off projects or something, and actually just to go and notice the injustices that are in the world. We've seen, rightfully so, the Black Lives Matter protests worldwide, and many young people, as we've already said, have strived to understand the injustices that have led to today's unequal society. I know friends have felt it's strange that we were actually unaware of it, and fundamentally it's really due to because the curriculum doesn't teach us about the kind of things, and doesn't tell us about the some of the things that this country is built on. And it's why virtually every single friend that I've spoken to wants to see a change in education and curriculum in BAMES nationwide, to make it more inclusive. We want students to learn the history of slavery, impacts of British colonialism, This could be in history lessons or through different school programs or outside of school that ensure students are educated about the history of racism so that they feel confident to challenge others when it does come up. I think it's also important to notice, whilst there has been progress made, there's still a distinct lack of LGBTQ plus education in schools, whether that's on history of rights for LGBTQ plus people, queer sex education, or actually LGBTQ plus figures in history. I'm really passionate because education at a younger age can go on to prevent issues like transphobia, biphobia, and homophobia, and it will be a fantastic step forward, for acceptance for everybody. Whilst I understand changing curriculum really can be a bit of a minefield, it's a current issue that a lot of young people want to see, and it would be great to involve a lot of young people in advising the changes to the curriculum, as there are really a load of passionate people out there. Eli, another one of the Boys in Mind youth advisors, is putting together a film on Black and minority ethnic people's experiences in BANES, soon to be released. Projects and films like this could be a perfect resource for actually educating students as to what's going on. I, for one, would be more than happy to be involved in the advising process surrounding education, and I'm sure there are many other young people in BANES who would also jump at the thought of helping to change it. Coming out of lockdown will be tough for many, and I've certainly been feeling anxiety around going back to whatever the new normal will be. And I think it's why it's so important schools have an effective mental health support network in place for those that may struggle. Boys in Mind have been working on a film with Beecham Cliff School about a whole school approach to mental health, discussing the steps that the school has taken to induce a 320% increase in boys seeking mental health support. I'd love to see a big push on a healthy environments for mental health at schools, perhaps using the Beecham Cliff film as a template or a resource. As I know, a healthy environment at school will be invaluable for people going back to school who aren't, doing so well. Progress at Beecham Cliff would not have happened without genuine partnership between staff and students. So I believe a partnership similar to that between the council and young people for mental health would have phenomenal results. The film's coming out tomorrow, and I highly recommend taking a watch of it. And I'm really passionate for students, and I'm really thankful that we have the opportunity to talk to you today, because it just has phenomenal results. This is the way things get done.
Thank you very much, Will. And Israel, can I ask you to address this question, please?
I think when we come out of lockdown, I think teachers or the council should try to organise more face-to-face school contact, since we haven't really been able to see our teachers or even go on calls with them. And I think that's quite important because such as me, I've been struggling quite a bit because I haven't really had any adult input or supervision. I also think there should be more mental health support, since this has been damaging to some people's mental health, not being able to see other people, being locked inside a house, basically. So I think that needs to be addressed. Also support for families, with who've lost their jobs, so maybe financial care, social care, social activities for them, and also offering summer classes or summer activities to kids who have been struggling with work, or maybe kids who rely on school for food, or maybe just need a break away from home because of abuse, or parents with alcoholic addictions and drug addictions. As well as that, I think we need to try harder to educate people more about Black history and Black experience, introducing workshops into schools, or trying to put it into the curriculum. Maybe that be history lessons, like learning about Africa before colonization, things like that, just so we're more aware about these social injustices and things like that. So we won't grow up with as many hate crimes and things like that towards Black people, and also more funding and promotion to Black families, such as mentoring for Black children, and just better race equality in BANES, so we don't have any of those social injustices or hate crimes towards Black people. And thank you. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much, Israel. And thank you to everybody that's spoken so far. So what I'll do is I'll give a bit of a recap, I think, of the answers to those questions. So I think everybody, and it'll be actually interesting to know whether or not you all spoke to each other before, because it was interesting to see the similarities that came out from your answers. You know, so you all, I think, by and large, cited public transport as a real problem in not just, the future for getting to school, but because it was taken away, you felt also that gave you, you lost independence from that, and that, did not help in terms of your isolation, in terms of your, that massively reduced social contact. And several of you raised the question about schools as a safe place, not just somewhere to get an education from, but actually somewhere that was really quite fundamental in providing a haven, perhaps from family life or from other problems that or other issues that are coming up, and felt that was felt a real loss in not being able to attend school. And it was also, again, very interesting to hear you all talk about what you felt was missing from education, as well as, literally just missing being educated as well. And I was quite interested to hear your thoughts about what could be done to help those children who have, and those young people who have not been able to access as much education as they may have wanted to have done at this time, and what could be done for the very near future, including sort of face-to-face interaction, which I know many schools, I'm sure, will be looking at and exploring for the near future, particularly as schools are told to reopen in September. On the other half, though, about what has been positive, what you found interesting from this period of lockdown, I think also is, it's as I said, repeating the word, is interesting. That fact that you've found time to pause, to reflect, to maybe learn some new skills, to spend some time with your families, to consider the injustices in the world, and particularly obviously around the Black Lives Matters movement and the issues that that is seeking to address. I think these are all things that we must find a way of building on, so that as a council and as a partner with a range of other organisations, we can do more so that those both the positives can be enhanced and built on, but also some of those negatives can also be thought about, and we can find ways of really doing something about that. And obviously in the past 3+ months, it has been very difficult for everybody, but we all need to work together in order to make our world a better place, and we can only do that if we, as those in authority, listen to everybody and absolutely listen to young people's points of views. So I know that there's a lot of things that I haven't included in summing up that section, but please be assured that I have taken lots of notes on that, and we'll make sure that we can do everything we can, and we will work with you if you will work with us to make sure we do that. Okay. All right. So in addition to those questions, we've also received some additional questions from a range of organisations. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in some of the other panelists on this call as well to give their views on those questions. And obviously, if anybody wants to, pitch in with an additional comment, then just put your hand up and let me know and I'll bring you in. Okay. So the first question that we received was from Rob Mitchell, who is the Supplementary Schools Coordinator and from the Black Families Education Support Group. And his question is this: we are seeing lots of social division and rising tensions, sometimes leading to violence. What will B&NES Council be doing in order to help reduce the social tensions and political violence in our area? Which I thought was a really good question, and actually quite in some ways a challenging question. I think we've been very lucky, in the last few weeks that we haven't seen quite the same level of violence as has been seen elsewhere, not just in this country, but across the globe, and so horrifically demonstrated by the killing of George Floyd and the protests that have arisen from that. So as a council, what we wanted to do was to start having conversations about that. And so we, a week or two ago, we had a webinar that actually looked at the history of slavery in Bath and in North East Somerset, because there are some people who didn't really believe that Bath had any influence from slavery, which was quite interesting. And if you didn't see that webinar, then I urge you to go and have a look at it. It was very interesting. We had a recognised authority, who gave a sort of the historical context, and we also had we also looked at modern slavery as well as looking at the sort of the interactions that then have come from and the consequences that have stemmed from slavery. As you probably will be aware, many of those that were enslaved were taken to the West Indies and places like that, and then in more modern times came to the UK as part of what's now termed the Windrush generation to help in a variety of ways in services in the UK. So that this thread has been running for a long time, and we need to first of all recognise that. We need to work with our schools and other places of influence to make sure that the whole history is taught, is understood, and we don't glorify elements of that. I don't know if Chris perhaps wants to talk about the work that might be happening within schools around education.
Hi. Yeah, I certainly think all schools in B&NES have been thinking about what is their role and what part can they play, particularly with educating young people about our history, but also making sure that children are aware of the issues of what's happening around them. I certainly know that schools have found it harder to do things that they normally would have done, because obviously they're closed, and if schools were open to a wider group of all children, I feel really certain that schools will be gripping those issues, and they'll be starting to lead really good and important discussions around what children need to know, not just about history, but what's happening in the current world around them. It's not been easy to do that in the current environment, to make sure they can get those messages across to all children and all time. I do know that some schools have been making individual efforts to do that. And I know that when children do return hopefully more children return to school, or all children return to school in September, that we'll be promoting it as an ongoing live issue, that we need to make sure that children have that opportunity to discuss and debate in an education environment, which they've not been able to have over the last few months. And I know certainly some of the CEOs and the MATs in schools as well, I've had individual conversations who are thinking about how they can take that forward.
Thank you, Chris. And one thing that had been suggested was that we actually had a panel of young people perhaps discussing slavery and Black Lives Matters. I don't know, you know, whether this panel think that's a good idea or not. Perhaps you know, you could nod if you think it's a good idea, or shake your head if you think it's a really bad idea. Okay, well, I'm seeing generally some positive nods of heads there, so thank you for that, and we will set that up, because I do think it is an important matter, and it's not just the you know, it's not just an area that only people, you know, of a particular age group should be considering. I think it's an area that we all, you know, need to be thinking about. Okay, I'm just checking if anybody else wants to come in on this question. Okay. It's always interesting juggling Zoom meetings like this, because you have to skim through the different screens just to check. I don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, so my next question then is from Bath and North East Somerset's Youth Forum. In fact, there's 3 questions here, so I'll do one at a time. And the first question starts with, we would like to thank the local authority for all the support we have had with our latest piece of work. We are creating a website for young people in BANES, and we currently have come up with 3 core themes: mental health, protect the environment, and respect. Whilst we are still working on this, we would like to ask the council how they can support us to promote our website to the wider BANES community, and how we can make sure our website is a vital resource to engage other people post-lockdown. So can I ask Mike if you'd like to start off with answering this question, please?
Of course, yeah. And I think that work sounds great, and there's some real resonances in those themes that you've come up with as young people that fit with both the core strategy of the council and the thinking of the Health and Wellbeing Board. So I think they're really good themes. I think as a council, some of the things we can do to help promote that website would be, you know, we can make sure we've got really good links to it on our own website, and we can make sure we're using our comms team to help push the message out through Twitter and other media that they use. I think one of the other routes we've got is, you know, the different partners that we work with, particularly schools. So I think, again, I'll be throwing a little challenge in Chris's direction in a second about how we can take that to schools, that we can use our school standards board, where we work with all of the multi-academy trusts and schools, school leaders, to say, actually, how can you make sure this website and the work that young people have been doing is really promoted and the awareness raised within your schools? And I think, I mean, the other bit for me is actually throwing the question back a little bit in terms of how do we really engage with young people and get to the channels that you, as young people, would actually take on board and think, oh, that's something I'd be interested to go and look at and investigate more, because, you know, it needs to not all be one way, us trying to push things. You know, your views and advice about what, you know, which forms of social media or other routes that you would take notice of. So I think you can help us with that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because, you know, we're, you know, likely to use, say, social media that we are comfortable with, but it might be not the sort of social media that you are accessing readily yourself.
Probably something you ditched about 2 years ago that we're just catching up with.
Exactly. Yeah. Will.
Yeah, I think I don't know much about the actual website, but I think perhaps what we've seen with Boys in Mind is getting different sort of things involved, perhaps blogs or videos or different things on that website from a whole range of different schools. And because a big thing for young people that will make them look at it is if, you know, they've got a friend in it And immediately, if they can see someone that they can resonate with someone, that will just be a big, big way of spreading it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, Will. Thank you. Okay. Any other speakers on this question? Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Will, as well. Right, my next question, again from BANES Youth Forum, is asking the council how they will ensure that our core issues of mental health, protecting the environment and promoting respect in the community will be at the forefront of their strategy going forward, both in lockdown and after. And I'm going to bring in Leslie Hutchinson into this one. Leslie, can you also introduce yourself, because I'm aware you weren't able to join us right at the beginning of the webinar.
I wasn't, and thank you for that. So hello everybody, and thank you for allowing me to join this call. I'm Leslie Hutchinson. I'm the Director for Adult Social Care, Complex and Specialist Commissioning. But in relation to children's services, I'm responsible for commissioning children's services for that element of the work, and also have oversight of the Community Safety and Safeguarding Partnership and the arrangements we have. And I think I can particularly answer that bit around mental health. So we've done a piece of work more recently looking at mental health, and we've been working across all of the COVID period about thinking around what are the types of services that we need to change the model of the way that we've already got them working so that they can help have a wider reach on different platforms. And we've been looking particularly at the activity and how much some of those online platforms have been used during this period, and how can we change some of the way that the traditional face-to-face services can operate differently to meet a broader group of young people that might need that help and support. And I think what we are seeing is that we're seeing a wider range of young people than we were expecting to see access those. That's what some of the data is coming and showing. So we need to think about what we're going to do going forward in order to make sure we provide enough for young people in terms of their mental health need, but also think about straddling that transitioning period over into adult services and what's the type of service that will meet that need as well going forward. Because I'm conscious some of you were saying that you were I didn't get introduced at the beginning, but some of you are year 13, aren't you? And you'll be going into that period where transitioning over. And there will be, of course, that thought to what type of service is needed to support because of the impact this has had. So in terms of that, we're having a particular look at mental health. And we know nationally we're expecting to see there's forecast to be a 30% increase in mental health support that's needed. Now, what we don't know is what that is in terms of what's the need for children and young people and what's the need for adults. And we need to do a piece of work looking at what does our community need. So I was very conscious when one of your colleagues came to the Health and Wellbeing Board and did a presentation about the Youth Forum on what these 3 priorities that you'd already asked us. And we did a little bit of feedback there in terms of mental health. But if there is anything that you would like to help with us to review those services, I think that would be incredibly powerful and helpful, particularly in that mental health field, because you could then be really involved in helping us redesign some of it if that's what's needed. So I can only answer the bit about mental health. In terms of the other 2 bits that you were discussing about the environment, there are other people that are better placed to answer those bits in terms of from a council perspective, but certainly that mental health bit I'm particularly interested in working with you on, and we acknowledge it's an issue that we need to do something more about.
I would say actually I think there's a very similar answer around protecting the environment and promoting respect in the community. You know, we need to be talking with you about how we can all work together to address these issues. We need to talk with you and not at you, and I think that's really important. And actually that leads really neatly into the next question, again still from the Youth Forum, which is how can we use our skills and voices as a group of young people in BANES to help to support the council and local authority during this time, and any plans going forward. So so from what Leslie and I have said, I think that gives you a really clear steer about how we want you to be involved and what we do want you to be involved. I guess the mechanics of that is something that we'll just need to work out a bit more. Kevin, obviously as the cabinet member for children and young people, I'm sure you've got something you'd like to say here.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dina. So, yeah, really good point there raised by Leslie. Excellent. And it's a really good question as well. I've met the Youth Forum a couple of times, and obviously a great bunch of individuals. And the question itself really is how can you, you know, put your input into some of our big upcoming policies? So what I'm thinking maybe is set up some sort of formal arrangement, maybe bi-monthly, where I myself pass on the council's big agendas that we're dealing with. And then you, in your next meeting, you formally feed back to me as a cabinet member with your thoughts and ideas. Then I can pass that on to officers, senior officers, and obviously cabinet members as well. And that seems a very sensible way to move forward, to get your views and thoughts on the big upcoming issues that we're dealing with as a council. So I think I'll implement that, if that's okay, Dina, and if that's okay with everybody on the panel as well.
Well, I think if the young people think that's a good idea, then we would do that.
Brilliant. I'll set that up.
Yeah,
then.
I've got a couple of nods on that one, and actually, it might be useful as well to bring along other cabinet members. You know, maybe to talk about the particular policy that they might be looking at as well, in case there's some, you know, there might be some very detailed questions that they would be able to answer, and you might not be able to answer, Kevin. Okay, so the next question is around it's about how do we get young people's voices heard, and this is from Will, who is on the panel from Boys in Mind, and the question is as such. I'll read the whole thing, which is: I really do value the fact that this webinar is taking place, as it is so important to get young people involved in advising change that will affect them. With this in mind, how in the future are you going to make sure that young people's voices are heard and that they're taking a lead in potential change? So actually the question before, I think, was quite pertinent to this. Will, is there anything else that you'd like to add, you know, that you'd like to see?
I just think this webinar has been a great opportunity for people all across, you know, to get involved. And I think similar things to perhaps, you know, depending on how it goes with lockdown and such, similar things to these kind of webinars where we get, or perhaps other meetings where we get people involved from a whole range of different places that want to be involved. I think that could be really great, you know, whether it'd be good to just consult, I think a range of different organisations from across from across BANES to get a whole, you know, complete picture.
And actually, one of the things I think has been good, and I think several of you referred to this, is one of the pluses of lockdown has been a greater reliance on these sorts of video meetings and discussions, and that helps with people when people can't actually access the meeting physically, you know, whether or not that's because there's a lack of public transport or it's quite costly to get to, you know, or a range of other reasons as well. So, you know, it's certainly something I think we should carry on with as one way of having a much more accessible conversation.
Dina, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
To interrupt. We have got a set of participation standards that are already in place, and I think now this is the opportunity for us to review those standards. The standards are probably correct in terms of the principles and standards we want to achieve, but it's those mechanisms for using it now that things have changed because of the way that we communicate with each other. So I think I would really welcome from the forum if you could have a look at those with us at one of your next meetings, and you'll be familiar with our participation officer, who does a lot of work to support the forum with you as well. And if we could work with that officer, and then they can link in as well with the bit that Councillor Guy was just saying, I think it'd be a really helpful thing to take us in the right, those steps in the right direction for that.
No, that's fantastic, and really, you know, really good to have an immediate piece of work to get stuck into. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, just checking the time. Oh my goodness. We're nearly out of time. I can't believe that. So I just wanted to ask, so I'm afraid we don't have time now to answer the other questions that have been sent in, but I think perhaps what we could do as a group is perhaps we could all have a look at these questions and come up with some answers, and then we could send those on to those that had asked the questions, if that's acceptable to everybody. Well, it just leaves it really down to me to say thank you to everybody for taking your time to attend this webinar, to everybody that's been watching live now, and to future viewers who'll be watching YouTube in the future. And to say that we will take on all the issues that have been raised here. We will consider, as I said, the questions that have been sent in and that we haven't had time to answer, and we will make sure that those answers get sent, as I said, to those that ask the questions. So thank you very much, everybody, and I just want to confirm that everything you said will be taken forward in the renewal report that will be going to Cabinet later on in this month too. Okay, so thank you everybody for your time, and I hope we get to meet each other in reality sometime soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.